With another Underworld being released, another soundtrack was bound to follow. The Underworld Evolution soundtrack was released on January 10th of 2006 and was released by Lakeshore Records and produced by Skip Williamson, Brian McNells, and Len Weissman, who also directed the movie. The soundtrack consisted of 16 tracks, and tonight we'll be covering the first half, starting with The Undertaker Renholder Mix by Percifer. Since this movie soundtrack had quite a few mixes on it, I decided it would be best to compare the mixes to the original ones. So that's what we'll be doing. So starting off with the Renholder mix, I made this one a 5 because it is probably the best opening for a soundtrack I've heard. And that's saying something because I remember giving the first track of the Underworld soundtrack a bit of high praise, as well with the Jason vs. Freddy opening a bit of praise too. But this one is probably the best track to start off a soundtrack with. And so what does the original song feel like? This one was something totally different. Not what I was expecting, but it's pretty good too. Sure, like my favorite one is the Renholder mix when compared to the other one, but both have something special about them and are easily probably the best track after the soundtrack so far. Next up, we have Morning After, the Julian K remix, written by Chester Bennington. Linkin Park isn't a band I've talked about too much on this channel, nor a band that I really have too much favorite songs from, but they're still a very important band that helped bring new metal into the mainstream. And so, what are my opinions on the song? I really love this song, and it's kind of difficult to choose whether or not I love this one or The Undertaker. But this one was one of the songs that made me want to even review these soundtracks in the first place. This one was a wonderful song, and same thing with the original version. Like, both are like straight up wonderful, and are probably some of the best songs I've heard recently. Number 3, we have Where Can I Stab Myself in the Ears, the Legion of Doom remix by Hawthorne Heights. This was a band I wasn't familiar with too much before hearing this one, but I can say as a first impression for the band, they do a pretty good job with the song. And honestly, I do have to say I do like the remix a lot better when compared to the original song. The original wasn't bad by any means. It's just I loved the new stuff that they added in the remix, although the original song was still pretty good in its own right. Next up, we have To The End, R&R Cheryl mix by My Chemical Romance. Yeah, there were quite a few things that changed in the music industry between the release of Underworld and Underworld Evolution. For one, well, the emo genre kind of exploded into mainstream and brought in quite a few new bands, one of which being My Chemical Romance. Although I'm not too familiar with this group nor other groups in this music genre, but I can definitely say this is one of the best songs off the soundtrack. Now, I'm more familiar with these guys than I am with anyone else in this genre, But we'll say that I did like the song. Both the original version and remix were pretty good. Although I do like the remix slightly better, but I do recommend both songs. Next up, we have Vermilion Part 2, the Bloodstone mix by Slipknot. 2 years before, Slipknot had just released their third album, The Subliminal Verses, and this was one of the songs that made it on it. This one is obviously part 2 to Vermilion, which was a pretty good song, but its sequel, well, it took me a while to actually start liking this one. Now, I definitely will say I do like the remix a lot better than the original, but both songs were pretty good. It wasn't really surprising to see Slipknot make it on another soundtrack, because actually one of the other songs made on the Freddy vs. Jason soundtrack, which was interesting. But of course, it's not really surprising to see one of the more well-known songs make it on a soundtrack. But just because it appears on a soundtrack doesn't mean I like it any less. It's still a pretty good song, although the first part is still my favorite one. Next up, we have another really great song off the soundtrack, Burn, the Alleged remix by Alkaline Trio. This was also a group that I've never heard of until this soundtrack review. And I gotta say that they almost took the top spot for my love for these songs. Both the original and remix are pretty wonderful, and honestly, I do like the remix a lot better. But I will say that both versions are pretty wonderful and could easily be the best song off the soundtrack. Next up, we have The Last Sunrise Dust Mix by Aiden. I like the mix a lot better when compared to the original, but both are also still pretty good. Not the best song off the album, but definitely one of the more decent ones on it. Next up, we have Bite to Break the Skin, the Legion of Doom remix by Senses Fall. Again, this was a band I did not hear of until this album, and I gotta say, first impressions were pretty good this time. I definitely did like this song, although I didn't like the name as much. It just didn't really feel too creative, but the song in general was pretty good. I loved the remix of it a lot more than the original version. But as I said before, that doesn't mean the original version is bad. I just like the remix a lot better. But all in all, the first half of the soundtrack was pretty great. I'm excited to see what the second half holds, as from what I found out, one of the songs, well, track 16, is a Samhain cover called Halloween 2, and it got covered by Cradle of Filth, so I'm looking forward to that one. And another band, Gosling, covered Cat People, the David Bowie song, so I'm excited to see how those two turn out. But we'll have to wait until next time. But until next time, I'm Moonlight, and I'm wishing you all a happy day. So be prepared for the next video. And for now, goodbye.